Well, here we are. The year of 2023 is coming to an end, and there's only 1 year and less left for the medium of movies, besides the animated movies, but that's its own thing. And I'm probably going to just do that as a YouTube short. And unfortunately, it's the most negative and difficult of them all. We've gone through the best movies, the most surprising movies, and the most disappointing movies of 2023. Now, it's time to go dumpster diving. It's time for the most abominable, most horrendous, most aggravating, and all around shittiest movies that I've subjected myself to in this span of 365 days. The top 20 worst movies of 2023. And there will be no mercy as we flush all these piles of dog shit down the drain once and for all to make room for inevitably next year's terrible, terrible movies. And here's your warning right now, this is a 14 plus video. It's not on the thumbnail because I couldn't fit it on the thumbnail, but yes, this video is going to have very predominant, very strong cursing. So, if you're someone who doesn't like that, I can understand if you want to skip this video, that's okay. I don't blame you, but for the rest of you, let's press on together. Before we begin though, let's start with some dishonorable mentions. Movies that scored a 5 out of 10 or below that didn't ultimately make the cut for the list. And I have quite a few of them because there was a lot of shit movies this year. And those films are The Champions, The Mother, Plane, Dumb Money, Strays, Killers of the Flower Moon, DC's Legion of Superheroes, A Man Called Otto, Infinity Pool, Doggone, Big George Foreman, Cocaine Bear, No Hard Feelings, Sick, House Party, Pope's Exorcist, Paint, The Boogeyman, Peter Pan and Wendy, Hypnotic, Joyride, Skinamarink, Justice League Warworld, You're So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah, Zoe 102, Beau Was Afraid, and The Flash. Yes, congrats, Flash. I was convinced you were going to be on this list, but you just barely escaped it. And as soon as I realized that, I made sure to save my big rant for you for that most disappointing list. So, congratulations, Flash. You outran the worst list, but you're still a piece of shit. So, without any further ados or delays, let's dive into the fifth circle of hell, shall we? Number 20 is Cocaine Shark. I was already not a big fan of Cocaine Bear, as you guys may have already known if you watched my most disappointing list. So seeing this direct-to-DVD knockoff truly was an agonizing experience. Terrible acting, terrible effects, terrible writing, terrible story, and the terrible kills all meshed together to make one of the most horrendous horror movies that I've seen all year. And you may be thinking, maybe it's so bad it's good. Maybe it's just so bad that it's laughable. No. This is one of those really shitty horror movies that doesn't know it's supposed to be a so bad it's good movie and takes itself way too seriously. And thus, becomes a pain in the ass to sit through instead of being fun. I don't even have fun making fun of this one. There's a reason I didn't do a review of it. It's because it didn't fucking deserve it. So, that's Cocaine Shark, number 20. Enough said. This video is going to be long enough as is. Let's move on. Number 19 is Love Again. I don't know if it's just my age showing, but almost every year I continue to find that rom-coms are just getting worse and worse. And this is one of the worst I think I've ever seen. A glorified Lifetime channel movie that decided to release in theaters that is marred with a predictable story, boring acting, forgettable characters, lazy writing, generic music, and painful pacing that was unenjoyable all the way through. Keep these half-assed snorefests out of theaters and only on television, so at least those of us that still have morality and sanity can at least ignore them. Please. Do not release these in theaters again. That's number 19. Next. Number 18 is Prom Pact. Disney had a pretty decent year quality-wise with some surprisingly enjoyable movies. But that doesn't mean that everything they made this year was good, so while they aren't as prevalent on this list as usual, they're still on this list. So let's start with the token Disney Channel movie that ended up on Disney Plus that always makes the worst list every year. Last year it was Zombies 3, this year it's Prom Pact. Sure, it's not offensively bad, with the exception of one morally reprehensible line of dialogue that you might have already seen on TikTok that makes me want to kick in the balls whoever thought that was actually good writing, or a good thing to throw in there. And if you're wondering what it is, it's a joke about periods. Yeah, they really fucking went there. But it's just such a waste of time and money that leads me to question why it even exists at all. Bland characters, unimpressive acting, generic story, and just all around fucking boring. Like, at least that one line of dialogue is so bad I remember it. The rest of this movie is just in one ear and out the other. Like, I barely remember shit about this movie. The only thing I remember about this movie is all the negatives I just said, and of course, like I said, that one reprehensible line of dialogue. Whenever you make fun of something like a woman's period, you automatically look like the fucking idiot. Just saying. I have a long-standing hatred for movies that treat women like shit. And this definitely treated women like shit. But not as badly as a certain other movie that you know is going to be on this list, just way further down. So that's Prom Pact. The token Disney Channel movie that ended up being a Disney Plus movie instead, that's bad and not worth your time. Moving on. 17 is Kids vs. Aliens. Easy target that's already pretty much been forgotten and ripped apart by everybody else, but I need to vent about it regardless. Terrible characters, generic writing, cliches thrown in haphazardly left and right that have nothing to do with the story, awful action, and zero passion put in whatsoever. Streaming, service, filler. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's literally all I have to say about it. 16 is White Men Can't Jump. Excuse me. I have never seen the original, but I like Jack Harlow, so I decided to give this Hulu exclusive a chance. And man, did I regret it. Awful acting, awful writing, terrible story, zero unexpected twists or returns, and inexcusably poor dialogue that just left me scratching my head. Just a waste of time. Even if you're a fan of Jack Harlow, it's a waste of time that's not worth your time. Save your time and use your time for something that's actually more important and more worth said time. For example, literally doing anything else besides seeing this fucking movie. Moving on. 15 is The Nun 2. Yet another unnecessary and unbearable Conjuring spin-off movie that relies less on storytelling and actual competence, and more on tired, overdone, derivative, and shitty jump scares. Enough said, moving on, because this terrible franchise is not worth wasting any more of my time over than I already have. I'm sorry, fuck the Conjuring franchise. Outside of the first two Conjuring movies and Annabelle Creation, the rest of this franchise has been dog shit. And Nun 2 may not be the worst one, it's not La Llorona, but it is still really, really bad. Don't waste your time, don't waste your money. 14, Haunted Mansion. Just copy and paste everything I said in my most disappointing list here, just like Disney copy and pasted the exact same mistakes from their first terrible adaptation of this material to this second failed attempt. And in fact, I'm gonna do something that they apparently did, and just copy and paste my personal thoughts on this movie from the most disappointing list. Play the clip. After being stuck with the Eddie Murphy movie for years as the only adaptation of this subject material, and a really bad adaptation at that, I rejoiced in delight when Disney announced that they'd finally be giving The Haunted Mansion a second attempt at an adaptation. Then add on paper the cast, mostly all sounding like great choices. Reese Stanfield, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, Jamie Lee Curtis. That's a great cast right there. And the trailer also showing some promise, with horrifying imagery that really pushed the boundaries of its PG rating, and a set of very diverse characters having to work together to survive the spooks of the mansion itself. That all sounds really interesting and could actually work pretty well. It all sounded so good on paper. But in execution, it completely fails yet again. Yet again, it completely fails. Yes, the main protagonist is surprisingly fantastic, played by Reese Stanfield, and delivers a great performance that absolutely deserves recognition. That is way too good for this piece of crap. And yes, some of the imagery is excellent and does a good job replicating the ghost of the original Disney World attraction. Yes. But literally, everything else in this movie is garbage! Literally, everything else in this movie is complete and total garbage. The rest of the characters are boring, or in the case of Tiffany Haddish's character in particular, downright annoying. The story is very haphazard and makes no sense. The pacing is an absolute mess. There's a ton of pointless filler. The runtime is egregiously long for no justifiable reason. And to cite some of the imagery, it's not scary at all. The dialogue is eye-rolling. With so much product placement, it makes Sonic, look tame in comparison. The writing is complete trash and so cliche, and by the end of it, I was just enraged. Because this is the second time they've tried to adapt this material into a feature-length live-action film, the third time they've tried to adapt this material in general, and the second time they completely fucked it up. And the fact that this came out only 2 years after the excellent Muppet version, which was released in October of 2021 and is still by far the best adaptation of this attraction and of this material, just makes it even more baffling how much it fails. It may not be the worst film this year, but it's undeniably the most disappointing one. Never touch this material again, Disney, because you very clearly suck at it, you clearly don't know how to adapt it, you clearly miss the entire point of the actual material itself, and most of all, you clearly don't have a single clue what you're doing. Not to mention this was released the same year you made the really good Little Mermaid remake. Shame on you. Yeah, that sums up all my thoughts on this movie. Moving on. 13 is Fool's Paradise. Guess I myself am a fool for expecting this to be anything even remotely good. But wow, this one is shit. Sure, Charlie Day's performance is by far the best part of it and deserves recognition, but just like our previous entry on this list, literally everything else throughout this movie is a mess. Stupid story, abysmal acting from everyone else involved, horrible pacing, overstays its welcome to a baffling degree, and it's just annoying as fuck. I'm sure it had good intentions, but in execution, they just completely missed the mark. I'm pretty sure it's going to be on a lot of other worse lists, so I'm not going to go super in-depth, but point is, Charlie Day did great, but the rest of this movie is shit. That's all I have to say. Going to readjust my camera a little bit. Let's move on. I'm flying through these because I really want to say my biggest hatred for my top 10. 12 is Nefarious, a preachy shit show that tries to use the guise of a horror movie to bash the audience over the head with its message and agenda. Even as someone who is Christian, I will never defend this type of shit, nor understand how it continuously keeps getting a pass instead of getting called out for how much it actually disrespects and degrades us Christians to make us look like just overly preachy crazy people. when in reality we are so much more than that. We don't bash messages into everyone else's skulls forcibly. We discuss what we believe, and we let people choose whether or not to follow the same path or find their own faith elsewhere. And wishing them nothing but the best, showing goodwill to your fellow men. But in conclusion, screw this misleading, distasteful, zero-effort, asinine, out-of-touch, and reprehensible pile of filth. And I feel bad for any Christian who had to sit through this pile of crap. That's all I have to say. Moving on. Number 11 is Fear. The token terrible horror movie that forgets that the January horror movie curse no longer exists has finally arrived. And it sucks just as much as you think it does. I would go into detail about why it's such a run-of-the-mill pile of overdone shit, but honestly, I don't need to. Because it's just like every other terrible horror movie that we've already seen dozens of times before from many years past and probably from many years to come. Why waste any more of my time rambling and ranting about it when it's just the exact same thing that's been done to death every single fucking time? Bad acting, over-reliance on jump scares, no storytelling, terrible writing, awful pacing, shit kills. What else is there to really say? It's a shit horror movie that's just as shit as you're expecting it to be. I literally have nothing else to say. Now, here we go. This is when it starts getting lengthy, because I have some things to say about this top 10. Yes, statistically, score-wise, it's not the worst top 10 that I've ever done on this channel or ever since I started reviewing movies in general. Because after all, this year I only had to give out 1 0 out of 10. Where last year I gave out 2, and the year before that in 2021 I gave out 6. So statistically, this is not the worst top 10 that I've reviewed for you. But my goodness, is it one of the most agonizing? What do I mean by that? Well, let me explain all about it. Starting off with our number 10, a movie I had no expectations for and I knew was going to be shit, The Children of the Corn remake. It's not the worst horror movie of the year, but it's undoubtedly one of the most pointless. Just like every other movie in this bastardized, overly bloated franchise, this remake completely fails at everything it supposedly sets out to do to such a baffling degree that it creates a Kamehameha-sized crater in the very earth itself because of how much it fucked up and failed. It's not scary. All the characters are morons. The story is derivative and tired. The acting is abysmal from everyone involved except the one little girl that's on the poster. She's the only one that actually puts effort in. The kills are terrible. The final act sucks hard. And the overall experience is the equivalent of getting constantly kicked in the balls for over 2 hours straight. That's it. That's all there is that needs to be said. Don't waste your money. Moving on. Number 9. Time for another easy target. Knights of the Zodiac. Is this the worst live-action anime adaptation ever? No. Let us not forget that Dragon Ball Evolution and especially Death Note both exist. But that doesn't mean that this is even in the least bit passable, because talk about missing the entire point of the actual source material. Yes, Saint Seiya isn't one of my personal favorite animes, but I can at least respect it for trying to be unique and fantastical. As in, set in a fantasy world and doing its own unique thing. And I do dig the armor designs, which are some of the most unique I've seen in any animated project. I will easily praise that. Whereas this adaptation doesn't give a single damn about its source material and in the slightest, and instead forces it into a standard and very generic Chosen One story that we've seen done 1,000 times before in the same way from many other franchises and even original films. Like, if you've seen a Chosen One movie, you know exactly every single beat of this fucking story. And like trying to fit a square peg through a round hole, it doesn't work. At all. Instead, it's just a complete and utter disaster that only uses the IP as window dressing to get more people to suffer through its bullshit unknowingly. This is a disgusting and disrespectful slap in the face to fans of the anime, as well as just to filmmaking in general, and is easily among the absolute shittiest movies of the year. And especially in a year where we got the One Piece Netflix show that I've heard is pretty good, that only makes this movie's sins even harder to ignore. Or even harder to fathom, honestly. It just seems like we're going to keep getting more and more of these terrible, terrible, terrible anime adaptations for live action. And I just don't know how many more of them I can personally take. Yes, it's not worse than Dragon Ball Evolution. Yes, it is not worse than the Netflix Death Note movie. But it's still a really bad live-action anime adaptation that is just as bad as you expect it to be. So. Sorry, I think I need to take a little break. I'll be right back in just a bit. Sorry about that, but at least I know this thing has a pause function now, so I don't have to completely, recut the video or anything, which is nice. I honestly didn't know that had that function until I started doing this video. But anyway, continuing onward. We are at number 8, I believe now, right? Because we just finished Knights of the Zodiac, so we're up to number 8. So, number 8 on the worst list is another movie that I know is going to be on pretty much everyone else's worst list, or at least most disappointing list, that I knew was going to be bad, but I had no idea how bad it was actually going to be. Number 8 on the worst list, and my personal pick for the worst horror movie of 2023, is Exorcist Believer. Ah, yes, the undisputed king of the shitty horror movies released this year, and it somehow still managed to shock me with just how awful it truly was. Only 1 year after ending the latest Halloween timeline with a loud and resounding shit, David Gordon Green decided that wasn't enough, and that it was time to make yet another terrible installment to cash in on another horror franchise with the help of Blumhouse again. This time, The Exorcist. However, unlike the Halloween series, Exorcist hasn't had a single good installment since the legendary original, so it gives this latest one even less of an excuse to be this atrocious, especially considering the fact that it tries to switch things up to avoid repetition, and yet somehow still manages to become repetitious regardless. Overly reliant on the same tired horror movie jump scares, a terrible plot, forced nostalgia bait, horrendous acting from everyone involved, writing a dialogue that's somehow even worse than that, terrible story, and the now very overdone tropes of these legacy sequels. Also, it's quite telling how the original movie is still so effective and actually scary all these years later, yet this latest one isn't scary in the fucking slightest bit. That says a lot about filmmaking nowadays, especially in the horror genre, where it just doesn't scare me or honestly anybody anymore. No one fell for this shit, and despite making way more money than it deserved to make, like a certain other movie we're gonna get to, trust me, it was still critically slammed by everybody, myself included, and I didn't want to review it because I had no expectation going into it, and I wasn't fooled like most people were. I knew this movie was going to be shit, I just wasn't expecting how shit it was going to be. So we're probably going to get another one of these, and I probably will have to force myself to watch it. But it is the worst horror movie this year, and the fact that a horror movie is not in the top 5 for once is actually a bit refreshing. Because after all, Jeepers Creepers Reborn was number 2 last year. So I mean, progress I guess, but Believer's still shit, regardless. So let's just move on and go back to forgetting this movie even exists. Number 7, Monkey King. I know I gave this movie a pretty decent thrashing in both my long as fuck review, and also in the most disappointing list. But believe it or not, I actually still have more to say about it. And I'm still not going to be done with it after this because it's going to be on the worst side of the best and worst animated films video. Fate is just not kind to me today, man. Not at all. So, let's just get it over with. Then we only have to talk about it one more time, and then we never have to discuss it again. Okay? Okay, let's press through it together. My hatred for this one still has yet to cease, not just because of how much of a crushing disappointment it was, but also because of how it is one of the absolute shittiest animated movies that I've ever suffered through. From its awful characters to how much it dumps all over the amazing source material, to its terrible music, to its horrible main protagonist as an unlikable and morally reprehensible asshole, to its rushed final act, to its forced plot twists, and especially its overall tone of harshness and misery. This was such a frustrating pain in the ass to suffer through, and numerous times I wanted to rage quit. But because apparently I'm just a glutton for punishment, I watched it all the way through to the end. And it literally pissed me off so much that I made a half-hour-long review only a mere 5 minutes after I finished watching it. And the fact that this was still not the worst movie of the year, that there was still even worse movies than this one, is mind-boggling. Fuck this piece of monkey shit. May it forever rot in the deepest, darkest pits of fucking hell for all eternity. We can move on now. Let's move on. Number 6. This is probably going to be the shortest of all these reviews on this list. And it's because, honestly, everything that's been said about it has already been said by a dozen people. So this is more here just for the archive, to prove that I am one of the people that did watch this movie, and had the expectation that maybe it could be decent. But no, it was a piece of shit. It's not among the top 5, but it is a very, very bad movie. Number 6 is 65. Honestly, not a whole lot to say about this one, it's just boring. Adam Driver's character is boring, the acting is boring, the dialogue is boring, the story is boring, the writing is boring, the pacing is boring, every single event in the movie is boring, and even the dinosaurs are boring. It takes effort to make dinosaurs boring, and yet this movie found some way to achieve it. How? I have no fucking clue. But I do know that this is a shit movie. That disappointed a lot of people, and honestly, disappointed me too. Not to the point of putting on the most disappointing list because I had low expectations anyway, but it was even lower than the low expectations I had going into it. If that's not a biting insult to this movie, I don't know what is. I still like Adam Driver, he's a very talented guy, but this was a very half-assed, atrocious misfire that I hope he never does again. Now we get into the top 5. And this is where I get really angry. This is where I talk about the absolute bottom of the barrel. Because 4 of these movies are 1 out of 10s, and my number 1, for the second year in a row, is a 0 out of 10. Wait, no, for the 3rd year in a row, it's a 0 out of 10. So, let's go through it together, shall we? I promise you not all of these segments are going to be very long, but this first one is going to be very long because I have a fucking bone to pick with it. Not to mention, it's the last time I ever had to talk about it, so might as well get all my fucking thoughts off my chest. Number 5 is Barbie. A movie that I gave a chance to at least be decent. And a movie that fooled me by the early reviews into thinking that it could be good. Instead, I got a piece of shit that whenever I tried to talk shit about it, I just got attacked on the internet. People calling me a woman hater or a toxic masculinist. Whatever the fuck that means. But like I've explained before, I do not hate women. I am not against movies that have women as the female lead. And I'm not against movies that try to empower or inspire other females. I have nothing but respect for females. And honestly, I get more pissed at these movies when they treat women like shit. Because, I don't know if you know this about me, but I fucking hate sexism. But there are times when the sexism is aimed at the opposite gender. And this is one of the most egregious examples I've seen in years. But like I said, it's the last time I have to talk about it, so I'm just going to go ahead and read off what I wrote down. And if I feel like I need to add more thoughts, I'll add more thoughts. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one, okay? So, don't call me a sexist for hating this movie. Don't call me a woman hater for hating this movie, okay? That could not be further from the truth. Here's my explanation for why I hate this movie. Why I actually hate this movie. It's finally time to put the final nail in this man-hating, agenda-driven trash fire's well-deserved coffin. I've spoken before about how I hate the term known as woke, and how I personally think it needs to die. So instead of using that term like any rage-baiting troll on the internet, I'm gonna use a different word to describe how utterly fucking shit this sorry-ass excuse of a movie is at its rotten, insidious core. Toxic. Everything about this movie is toxic, to such an alarming and morally reprehensible degree, so egregious that it actually makes both Wonder Woman 1984 and the awful, awful Black Christmas 2019 remake actually look competent in comparison. This is not a movie about female empowerment, as it likes to supposedly claim. It's a movie made by a sexist, feministic cunt and her band of out-of-touch morons about how terrible men are, how women should never have children because of men, unless all the children are daughters, and how men are the biggest problem in all of existence itself. That right there was more than enough for me to despise it with every fiber of my soul. But then it went the extra fucking mile by trying to cover up all of this with a recognizable IP that allows them to market this toxic shit show with its actual harmful messages to fucking children and brainwash them into following its ethically and morally reprehensible ideology that can be legitimately harmful to them or fuck them up as they get older. Then there's also terrible acting from everyone involved. Seriously, everyone. Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, Simu Liu, Will Ferrell, fucking Michael Cera. Everyone in this movie is terrible. Everyone is terrible. Awful music. One of the worst movie soundtracks I've ever heard in my fucking life. Terrible story, abysmal writing, outright shit CGI, and it's pure up its own ass arrogance that somehow made it even more unbearable to sit through. And the fact that all the YouTubers and film critics that I've trusted for years couldn't see that and instead just blindly praised this movie as supposedly one of the best movies of the entire year is utterly fucking sickening. Zach Pope, Angry Joe Show, and many numerous others. Watch Mojo, IGN, all of you. All of you who gave this movie such high praise or called it one of, if not the worst movie, one of, if not the best movies of the entire year. You are the fucking problem. Sorry, I just need to get off my chest because it's pissing me off. Oh, and it's only made worse by the fact that this was the highest grossing movie of this year. Yeah, fuck you, Mario, apparently. And even nominated for fucking Professional Film Awards. Which honestly goes to show just how fucked up this society is, when this is what is getting attention instead of actual movies like Mutant Mayhem, which struggled to even make back its budget because of this utter fucking abomination to all of humankind. Fuck this movie. Fuck everyone involved in making it. Fuck the fact that this made $2 billion fucking dollars. And fuck the fact that I despise all that, despite all of this, it's somehow not even the worst movie of this year. Let's just move on before I throw up or pop a blood vessel, and so I never have to talk about this fucking garbage again. Fuck this sick filth! Moving on. Number 4. Murder Mystery 2. Let's keep this one brief because I mainly ranted about this one also in the most disappointing list. It's a terrible sequel to a surprisingly fun first movie that's so bad that it makes Adam Sandler's worst movies look tolerable in comparison, and yet isn't even the worst thing he put out this year. What is? Number 3, Leo. Here's a question for you. Does an animated movie about a talking lizard that degrades pregnant women for listening to their doctors and going on maternity leave, and treats said morally fucked up act like a joke, sound like a fun time to you? If you actually have a functioning brain and a good moral code, more than likely your immediate response would be, of course not, Jack. What the hell is wrong with you? But unfortunately, there are those people that would actually answer yes to this question, and thus this disgusting thing became one of the most praised Netflix movies of the year. And as a result, I've lost even more faith in humanity. This is that special kind of movie that comes around once in a great while, that writes some of the most reprehensible and creatively bankrupt dialogue you'll ever hear, has voice acting so bad you swear it was being done by AI, a story so offensive and toxic that you want to punch everyone involved in creating it, and then treats you, the viewer, like you're an absolute idiot with no intelligence and no attention span. Sure, it may have had good intentions to teach kids about aging and wisdom, but when it's half-assed to this degree in its execution, and buried under all these horrible jokes that just make everyone involved look so morally reprehensible and disgusting as human beings, all those good intentions ring hollow. Fuck this movie, and don't you fucking dare show it to children. Moving on. Number 2, The Marvels. There really is nothing like the feeling of knowing that a movie is going to be bad, and actually being right about it, despite being given so much bullshit from other people online saying you're being too negative or you hate on this movie because you hate women, so on and so forth. And congrats to Disney for having a decent year and yet still managing to land a spot in the top 5 of the worst list for the 3rd year in a row. First time with Home Sweet Home Alone, second time with Hocus Pocus 2, and the 3rd time with this. Captain Marvel was bad, and Miss Marvel, despite having good intentions, and made by decent human beings, was even worse. But wow, this has just got to be the worst of all 3, without a doubt. Well, not the worst MCU movie, because it's not Thor Love and Thunder and treats fucking cancer like a joke, which automatically puts it above that and a couple other movies I can think of. And is overall a harmless film with no bad messages or toxic arrogance. It gets this spot because of my continued frustration with the MCU itself. Ever since No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness, the last great films of this series leading into Phase 5, this cinematic universe has been a complete mess that has no clue what to do with itself or its characters. Sure, Ant-Man 3 was solid enough as a starter to Phase 5 as one of the only people in the world that actually liked it, despite horrible CGI MODOK. And Guardians 3 was great, but Thor 4 Love and Thunder, Eternals, and this have all been unbelievably bad, which in turn damaged the entire MCU's reputation. It really is sad how this went from the pinnacle of excellence to everything wrong with modern comic book movies. How they're so overdone and tired and lacking in originality or passion. Suffering superhero burnout or not, though, still wouldn't change the fact that this movie is terrible. And shows that this universe desperately needs a reboot, or at least to take a break for a few years. But because it's Disney and Marvel, and they both love money, they're not going to give it a break. And don't even get me started on the bad TV shows from this MCU. Because unless you're Loki, it's all pretty bad. So yeah, it got the number 2 spot, mainly because of how frustrated I am with the MCU itself. How frustrated I am with the MCU itself. I mean, like I said, the movie itself is overall harmless, and if you're one of the people that actually enjoys it, I can respect that. But I'm just almost at my breaking point with this MCU, because I want it to be great. I really do want it to be great. I want it to go back to the greatness of, like, Phase 2 and Phase 3. But instead, it just feels like it's been stuck in horrible mediocrity. Sure, like I said, there's No Way Home, there's Multiverse of Madness, and there's Guardians 3. And heck, even Shang-Chi was pretty good, despite not getting any actual attention, which sucks because that movie's decent. But then you have Thor 4 Love and Thunder, and Eternals, and all the other ones, and I'm already forgetting. Oh, and Wakanda Forever, I almost forgot. That's among the great ones too. I forgot. I apologize. But I'm just fed up with the MCU and its mediocrity. We need a great MCU film again. Please, Disney, Marvel, I know you like money, but please take a break for a little bit. Take a break, regather your thoughts, and really put effort into your next project. Whether it's Spider-Man 4, Fantastic Four, Blade, or any of the other projects you supposedly have planned. Just take a break, recuperate your thoughts, take a year or two off, and focus on what's in front of you. And please don't fuck up Deadpool 3. I do not want to bash that movie because I really like the first two. Just take a break. That's all I'm asking. Take a break or reboot everything entirely. Because this is so overdone, boring, and stale that I pretty much just look forward to putting these on the worst list almost every year. Instead of automatically being shoo-ins for the best list most of the time. And that is a very sad fact, considering the fact that I was pretty much with this franchise since the beginning, the original Iron Man in 2008. And since then, like, ever since Avengers Endgame, it just feels like you have no idea what to do with this universe anymore. Hell, I'd honestly say just go back to making one-off films. Just please listen to your audience, take a break, and either reboot everything or really put your all into your next project. That's all I ask. Okay? And I mean no hatred towards anyone involved in this movie, aside from Brie Larson, who has been proven to be a shitty human being. I don't hold any ill will towards either of the other two actresses, or Nick Fury, or any of them. They're simply doing what they were paid to do. Could they have been better? Yes, absolutely. But it could have been worse, and it was more than likely the fault of the direction rather than them themselves. I just want to make that really clear. And poor Nia DaCosta. I feel bad that this has to be her big follow-up after the surprisingly great Candyman 2021 movie. That's a sort of requel, sort of not. It's weird. That movie's weird, but I really liked it. So, no hate for everyone involved here. I more just hate it because I'm burnt out in the MCU. We really need a great movie in this franchise again that's not Guardians and that's not Spider-Man to prove that this franchise still has a purpose for being around besides making money. Which not even you did this year, Disney, because this was the year that you financially flopped pretty much everywhere. Even in your movies that were legit great, like Wish and Elemental, they flopped. You had a really bad year financially, and I hope that this leads to you making better decisions going forward. Because I do not like putting the MCU movies on the worst list every year. Almost every year. But I have to call it as I see it, and as I see it, this is a bad movie in a bad universe that has completely lost its sense of touch. But still, it's not the worst movie of this year, because I did see one that was worse. The only movie this year that I gave a 0. What movie was that? Well, let's talk about it together. Number 1. I don't really know how to lead into this number 1 pick. It's a movie that I hated when I first saw it. I hated it again when I subjected myself through it a second time, thinking maybe I was just too angry, maybe it just caught me on a bad day. This is a movie that's barely even a movie. In fact, I'm not even going to call it a movie. It is 2 hours plus of straight advertisement. From the NFL to a bunch of other random shit. All done by a cast and crew that clearly did not give a single fuck about what they were doing. A movie made for the most cynical and corporate of reasons imaginable. To exploit every single fucking person that was in any way a fan or at least interested in this sport and in this particular celebrity. I usually point out product placement in movies because it's something that definitely shows that there is still a corporate side to these movies, and this might just be the most corporate of them all. It is a movie that I hate with every fiber of my soul. It's a movie that doesn't deserve to exist. It's a movie that takes a supposed true story and flips it into one of the most egregious shit piles I think I've ever seen. And it makes it even worse that people bought it and people actually liked it. I understand film is subjective, but I cannot understand anyone who actually likes this piece of shit. And I don't have to watch this movie again after this, so let's go through this together, shall we? Number 1, the worst movie of 2023 is 80 for Brady. I literally have no idea what to say, so instead, I'm just gonna read off my script, and we're gonna call it there. Because I pretty much already excreted all my thoughts and hatred of this movie in my actual review. One more. There was not a single film this year that pissed me off more than this one did. Some got close, but this one was just outright insulting to the medium of film and everything it stands for and represents. This is not a movie as it likes to claim. This is a nearly 2-hour long commercial for the NFL and how much of an exploitative bastard they are, with a desire for money that's so bottomless that it even makes EA cringe in revulsion. But of course, this is about the biggest of these exploited bastards, Tom Brady himself. So no one should be surprised how corporate and soulless this thing is. Starring actresses from the 80s and 90s who are clearly desperate for paychecks, this horrible dumpster fire just meanders along with no actual story whatsoever, despite what the bullshit marketing may lead you to believe. And instead throws constant advertisements in your face to try and brainwash you, the viewer, to buy their products so they can keep exploiting you even further in the future. Then throw in celebrities on top of that to drag this utter waste of space out even further than it already is, and do even more blatant fucking advertising while you're trying to watch the fucking movie. This isn't a movie made with passion. It's just an overly long commercial riding the final years of Tom Brady's football career all the way to the bank while simultaneously stroking his fucking ego, with zero fucks given for the actual people watching. It's a pile of absolute dog shit. One of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, and without a single fucking doubt, the most abominable, the most horrendous, the shittiest, the worst movie of 2023. And with that, I officially never have to talk about any of these films again, aside from brief mentions in the best and worst animated movies list. Thank goodness. Thank you all for watching this video all the way to the end, despite my anger and intense negativity. Feel free to leave your personal worst movies of the year list in the comments down below. And I'll see you guys next time when we move on to the best and worst games of 2023. And that will be a much better list because it's only a top 10 worst list, I believe, right? It's only top 10? Let me look. Give me a minute. Let me look here. Oh, okay. It's 15, but it's not all that bad. And it's definitely going to be easier to stomach than this. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you like content like this. I apologize for getting so angry and so, rageful, but these pieces of shit had to be flushed down the toilet so we can move on to the next year. And thankfully, with the exception of the animated films, I never have to talk about any of these films again. Thank goodness, because I need to reserve my sanity. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time when we dive into the worst games of 2023. Until then, I'm Jack Small. This is Animation Station. Have a fantastic night, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.